University of Rhode Island Computer Science and Statistics Department. Now that we have successfully been able to install Nmap on our Windows operating system and on our Linux operating system, it's time to learn how to perform a basic Nmap network scan. However, before we begin that, we need to first learn about the 6 port states that are recognized by Nmap and a little bit about how Nmap presents its results to us as users of Nmap. So the 4 ports or the 4 states, which I will start with, that you need to have a good understanding of, are the following, and that is the state of open. Okay, so whenever you see that a state is written as open in Nmap, one of the things you need to remember is that it essentially is accepting connection requests, and what that means is it's an application that is actively accepting TCP connections or UDP datagrams or SCTP requests. Okay, so that is what usually you will see when Nmap presents a port as open. The next thing you should be familiar with is a state of close. So a state of close essentially means that really no form of service is responding to that request. The closed port is still accessible in Nmap, but there's really no application essentially listening on that port. The third port is a filtered port. Typically, these ports are blocked by the firewall. So an unfiltered port state essentially means that the port is, a filtered. A filtered port means that Nmap cannot determine whether the port is open because the packet filtering prevents its probes from reaching the port. Okay, and usually this is because of some dedicated firewall device, routers that have specific rules, and these ports really are frustrating when it comes to trying to access and attack the system because they really provide you with little information, and that's a filtered port. Lastly, we have what is known as an unfiltered port. So an unfiltered port is a port that is accessible through scans typically, but we're really unable to determine whether the port is open or closed to us. All right. So those are the 4 states that you're going to see when you perform an Nmap scan, that you should really have a good understanding of what these states are, what they mean, and what they are going to present to us as security administrators to ensure that our system is secure and functioning properly. The next thing you're also going to be run into is if Nmap is not sure of the state, it may report what is known as 2 options. And those options are open filtered and closed filtered. Essentially, an open filtered port is when Nmap places these ports in this state when it is unable to determine whether the port is open or filtered. All right. This occurs for scan types in which the open port really gives no type of response to Nmap. And the closed filtered port this state is used when Nmap is really unable to determine whether the port is closed or filtered. Okay, so it is only used for the IP ID idle scan. And if you want to know exactly where to get this information that I just presented to you, you can actually go right to nmap.org book/man-port scanning, and you'll get a definition on chapter 15 of Nmap that really will present the 6 port states that are recognized by Nmap. It's really typically 4 because these are the 4 that I need you to be familiar with, and that's where I pulled exactly what I am presenting to you here. Okay, so that's what these essentially are. So now that we have a good sense of what we've seen here, let's perform a Nmap scan to see how this works. And in order to do that, I'm going to attempt, and I'm going to run a basic scan on my Nmap machine. And I'm going to scan the DNS server for my Nmap system. So to do that, I'm going to do, if you recall in our previous lecture, if I do an nmap -v, I can see what version of nmap that I'm running. So I'm going to run an nmap scan me .nmap.org. So I'm actually scanning the DNS server here for my nmap. What did I write wrong? I wrote something wrong. So I didn't write scan me .nmap.org. Okay. I wrote a comma in there. That's why it didn't start the scan properly. So the scan is going to take place, and it usually takes a few seconds before I will get some results. Um, and once the scan is successful and complete, I should get some results that should display whether ports are open, closed, or exactly what it is that's happening to my port. So what I essentially did here is I scanned the network by specifying the DNS name of the server. So there are many ways to run a scan as the scans go. As I'm waiting for the scan to go through, I'm going to explain to you what they are. And that is, I can scan a DNS server if I know what the DNS is. So, for example, I could scan a youtube.com, a mit.edu, or whatever the case may be, any DNS servers that I may know the domain name for. I can also perform scans by IP. So if I don't know the DNS name and I know the IP, I can also put that in as well in order to get results for it. And if I don't know the IP, but I do know the DNS name, I can also get results that way as well in my Nmap simply by running what is known as um, a command that I kind of want to show you once this runs. Usually, again, it doesn't usually take this long, but since we are in a virtual machine, it is going to really take its time to go through the network, scan, and assess exactly what it is that's happening within the network. Okay, so if you get the DNS name and you don't really know what the IP address is, you will be able to run a command that will give you the IP address as well. So my scan's complete, and you notice here that I have a few things that is shown in my scan. So the first thing the scan shows me is ports, the state of these ports, and the services related to those ports. And you notice that it also gives me a state that is related to the ports that I just performed a scan for. In this case, I have port 22 that's open, port 23 is filtered, port 80 is open, port 514 is filtered, port 2605 is filtered, 6004 is filtered, and port 9929 is open, and port 31337 is open. And you notice the service that is related to them, right? So port 22 is related to SSH. Port 23 is filtered, it's related to Telnet. Port 80 is HTTP and it's open. And port 31337 is an elite port. And just so you can be aware of this, that's one of the ports you most likely want to close if it's ever open in your system, because that's the port most hackers tend to attack to try to get into your system. But before we go further into this, let's run a command that will actually give us the IP address for our DNS server. So to do that, I'm going to run the dig command. And what the dig command does is it basically digs for the IP. So I'm going to do dig scan me .nmap.org. And you'll notice that it will return the IP address for me. Let me see here, of my server, right? And you notice that the IP address is 45.33.32.1. .33.32.156. So let's actually do a scan of that as well. So I'm just going to come here instead of scanme.org. I'm just going to do the IP 45.33.32.156 and it's going to start the scan for me once again. And the results that you're going to get will be the same. Essentially, what it does is it's going to do a reverse DNS lookup and look for anything that is open in that port as well. And if you take a look at the above ping or the above scan that I did, Nmap scanned over 1,000 ports, the first 1,000 ports, right? And out of those 1,000 ports, 8 is what it found results to, where I can enter the system, right? So port 22, again, SSH, so I can easily use this to backdoor into the system. Port 23 is filtered, and if you recall correctly, right, a filtered port is essentially blocked by my firewall, so there's really not much I can do in port 23 to telnet into the system. Port 80 is an open port, which is HTTP. Again, you need that port to be able to access the internet. Port 514 is filtered, and the reason port 514 is filtered is because it is blocked by my firewall, and that port is usually where my system server information is logged, right? So it's a port for services that are heavily used. Port 2605 is also filtered, which is another good thing because it's blocked by my firewall. So that port usually is what has uh, TCP UDP type of information. Let me see. So I'm trying to see. So that port most often is used to enter. It can be used to enter your system, and that port really stores information for you. So you definitely want to make sure that that port is protected and blocked. And you can look again if you look right when I did the Nmap, when I did the scan with the IP. Here I got the result that I was essentially looking for, and you notice that the same different results actually came back, right? So by running the network scan, my by running the network scan, my system actually was able to, by running it using the IP, identify a few things that happen so it can actually fix and solve some of its issues. So you notice that more open ports came back when I used the DNS versus the IP address, so to speak. But it did a reverse lookup, so you notice that I still have the DNS that is showing and the IP. So that is how you perform a basic network scan using Nmap. Thank you for watching.